Hi everyone, welcome here to a session for how to become a nurse in Manitoba, a licensed nurse. So we're going to be talking mainly about the stream for CRNM as well as CLPNM, so a licensed practical nurse. Some of you might not be aware of that process. There might be some more participants coming in today as the session gets started, so we'll let people filter in if they are late. So you might be hearing some chimes as they enter the room today, the virtual room. The session will be about an hour and 15 minutes or so, and we are recording the session today. So if, some of you are participating with young children, as we saw, so if, your kids are distracting you for a little bit and you don't hear parts of the session, it will be recorded and up on YouTube, and we'll send people the link to that so they can go back and refer to what was said today. My name is Manola Barlow. I'm the diversity coordinator here at the Manitoba Nurses Union, and I direct the Canadian Culture and Communication for Nurses program, and have been doing that since 2008. So I've worked with internationally educated nurses for quite some time, and I've seen some of these licensure processes change along the years. So I'm happy to meet with you guys today and to discuss some of the challenges that come with this process today. If you're new to participating in a webinar, most of you are students of the CCCN program, so you're quite familiar with it. So have your headset ready to go in case we do go to sound. It looks like we might be having a small group today, so we'll probably be able to open it up to sound and video for questions as well during different parts of the webinar today. And there's also a chat. So in the chat, you can also type your questions, and Briar Jamieson, one of our consultants, is joining us. So she'll make sure that those questions are being addressed, and if I don't see those questions right away, she'll be letting me know. Okay, so some of these questions might not be addressed today, and if I don't pretend I know all the answers to everything, so if there's a question that we're not sure of, we'll try to get back to you and answer that, or refer you to a resource that does answer that question. All right, any questions? Okay, and you're muted, so the questions would just be in the chat. Okay, so I don't see any questions there either. All right, the objectives today, I want to give you guys an overview of the licensure process. Some of you might be more familiar with the process than others. You may have gone on the licensing body website and read through the many handbooks that are available to internationally educated nurses. And some of you, maybe this is going to be all new information. So I understand that people are participating from different levels today. All right. So we want to talk a little bit about English proficiency, NNAS, clinical competency assessments that are conducted, bridging programs, NCLEX exams, things like that. All right. I won't go through all the handbooks because they're just too long. They're very long. So we'll be going through different parts and making sure you know where to go for more information. Okay. I'm going to be giving you tips along the way to complete the licensure process, hopefully effectively and successfully, at least in my opinion. And I want to provide you to links to funding opportunities as well, because this process of becoming licensed in Manitoba and Canada is expensive, right? Some of you might already know the cost involved, and some may not, but it is definitely an expensive cost. Also, just a disclaimer that this presentation does not replace information on the licensing body's websites, okay? And it's current as of today. So as you know, things do change. Licensing bodies, they do change their process and their procedures from time to time. So getting timely information is really important. And I'll be speaking to that a little bit later in the session. So introduction, so we do have a pretty small group. So I'm going to see if we can even just open this up on the box, so we can kind of unmute audio as we go through the session. Okay, so maybe Briar, if you can also assist with that, that would be great, and just start
Sure.
with videos, that'd be great.
I'm just trying to get sound for Tamarnesh, but I will, why don't I unmute people so they can introduce themselves?
Sure.
Alvin, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Oh.
No? Okay. Just in the chat, tell me who would like to go first to introduce themselves.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, it's me.
Hi, Alvin. Tell us where you're coming from and where you're joining us from, if you're in the program, and what module you're in.
Actually, I'm. By the way, I'm Alvin Castillo. I'm from the Philippines. So, right now I'm for the module 2 of the review for the Talban, and right now I'm currently having the process. So hopefully I can register for the licensure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Priyanka, you want to go next? I'll unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my name is Priyanka. I'm from India, and I'm done with my Salban, and I will get my evaluation. It's like an advisory report from NNAS. I'm just waiting for that.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. That's it.
Okay, great. Okay, who would like to go next? You can go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand.
I'm Jenny Makasaki. I'm from the Philippines, and I'm in Module 1.
Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone next?
Hello.
Hello. Who do we have?
Hello. Yeah, hi, this is Nicholas.
Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Rubin, and I'm from India.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I think you told us before you're already in module.
Yeah, I'm in module 2.
Great. Oh, 2.
Great.
Yeah.
Welcome. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So, as I'm just going to mute audio again for everyone there. Okay. Yeah, so as you can see, people are coming from different places. People are at different places in their process of becoming a nurse. Some have passed the language requirement already and done the CCA, so have experience with that, and now are waiting for some of the next steps. So we could even maybe get them to tell us some of their experiences in that if we do have time today. But sometimes at first I did use this picture on purpose because sometimes people feel like they don't see the big picture in what's required for nursing. So they feel like maybe they understand part of it and that they can see part of the road ahead, but the rest of it, it's very unsure, and they're not sure what's coming next for them, or maybe, you know, in their life in general. So I just want to acknowledge that you are not alone in that experience, and that many internationally educated professionals do feel that way, and that the process for becoming a license, whether it's in nursing or in a different profession, does take time. So we're going to talk about those timelines today as well. All right. Okay. Sorry, I just muted. Everyone can hear clearly today. All right, so where do you get information from? If you guys can answer some of that in the chat box, where do you get your information from? So you see some of these responses here. All right, so if you want to type in the chat box, where do you get your information from? Manitoba Start, great. PNAM, okay. From the web, internet and friends. Okay, so some of those I would say are really good sources of information, and some I might caution you guys about. So friends and family, if we just want to think about that. So our friends and family, they mean well, right? They want the best for us generally, and they try to give us good information, right? But what I tend to see working with internationally educated nurses, and hearing many stories from what people have told their friends or family, is that that information isn't always accurate. Okay, so you might have a really well-meaning aunt. So maybe your aunt is even a nurse, and maybe she came here 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and she went through the process herself. So she's giving you the information maybe that she had at the time. And the problem with that is that the information is not current, okay? So getting outdated information is actually really dangerous. And it could lead you in the wrong path. So you want to make sure that your information is current, okay? Even if you had a friend that you met maybe here in Canada and they went through the process, you know, 2 years ago, you might think, well, that's quite recent. It's probably mainly the same. So there might be similar pieces in that process, but there might be some changes as well. So again, you could listen to what your friend is saying, but what I'm strongly encouraging you to do, and even after today, is to verify that information. See, is this information actually true? Okay, is it accurate? And have I gone directly to the source? Okay, so Manitoba Start, generally good source of information, right? They have a health navigator there that presents the process of becoming a nurse. If you've attended that, a lot of this will be a repeat of that session, and it probably, you won't have too much new information today, but maybe there might be some, and there is a lot of information when you hear it for the first time. So sometimes repeating the same thing isn't a bad thing. But again, the Manitoba Start, they're not the licensing body, right? So make sure that you verify that information to see, is that true? Myself, I work for the Manitoba Nurses Union. I do not work for the licensing body. So it's good to verify what I'm saying as well with the licensing body, with NNAS. Okay, so again, going to the internet, it's where are you going? Are you going to blogs and discussion boards? I know PNAM has Facebook group, which I'm a part of, and I think it's generally a good source of information, but I've also seen sometimes there's, it's a big community, so there's sometimes people aren't quite sure about the process either. So again, just verifying, is that information true and accurate, and have I gone to the source? Okay, so remember to ask yourself that as you're getting information about the process. Nursing designations and regulators in Manitoba. This might be new for you as well. So in many places around the world, a nurse is a nurse, and there aren't necessarily different designations. So although nurses may work in different units perhaps, or different specialties, the designations might be generally RN, right? So you might be most familiar with registered nurses. Perhaps in your country of origin, LPN and that designation maybe doesn't exist. RPN, registered psychiatric nurses, maybe doesn't exist, or nurse practitioners. Right. So I'm presenting that today just so you're aware that there are 4 different nursing designations, and that's 4 different scope of practices. Okay, so those different designations, according to their education and training, are able to perform different things. Okay, and it does depend on the employer as well, where they're working. Right. Nurse practitioners have extended practice. Okay, so if you're a nurse practitioner, and if you've ever been to a quick care clinic in Manitoba, Winnipeg has a couple quick care clinics. They're run by nurse practitioners, right? So nurse practitioners work as a part of the team, as a part of a nursing team in those clinics, and they actually are able to prescribe certain medications, right? So that's why their scope is extended, right? They're able to do slightly different functions, and their schooling, they have more education than RNs and LPNs. So that is a specialty, and maybe something that you're maybe even interested in the future. Okay. So if you see different job postings and they're talking about nurse practitioners, that's what they're talking about, and you can find out more information about that on CRNM's website. Okay. One of the main differences between LPNs and RNs is their base level of education here in Canada. Okay. So LPNs, it's a 2-year degree, and with RNs, it's a 4-year program. Okay, so that's the main difference. Although I want to point out that there are many internationally educated nurses that are educated as RNs that challenge the LPN process. Okay, so then when they're applying for their license, they might try to get an LPN license. Okay, so that is an option as well for you, and it's something that you actually need to point out in your NNAS file right away if you're applying to 2 different licensing bodies. Any questions on that before I move on? Type your questions in the chat box if you do. The nurse practitioner program, I would need to double check that, Nicholas. I believe it's an additional 2 years, but I would want to verify that implication. Alvin, I will address that question in a little bit when we start talking about NNAS, because it's something in the NNAS process that you have to select and you have to pay additional fees for if you're applying to more than 1 licensing bodies. For registered psychiatric nurse, just so you know, most internationally educated nurses are not qualified for that licensing body. And the reason being is that they require, I believe, about 1,400 hours with specific training related to psychiatric nursing. So it is a specialty. So there are RNs, though, that work maybe in psych wards and with patients with mental illness. So RNs can still work on those units, but RPNs have specialized as education related to psychiatric training. Okay, so most programs around the world, with the exception, I think, of England and maybe a couple in Denmark, generally do not provide that in their education. So most IENs aren't. They can't challenge that process generally. Okay, but I put it up there just so you can see that. You can look into that if you like. But today I'm going to focus on LPNs and the RN process. All right, so one of my first things I want to emphasize is that it's really important to read in detail, so not to just skim the document, but to read in detail the NNAS, so the National Nursing Assessment Service documents, College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba and College of Licensed Practical Nurses of Manitoba websites, and the IEN application handbooks before you pay any fees. Okay, so basically know what you're getting into. Okay, in health we talk about having making sure patients have an informed choice, and I want to emphasize that to IENs that we work with is that before you start the licensure process and decide, you know, am I going to pay an additional fee for LPN and also RN? Or am I not? So to make an informed choice, so making sure that you have that information. So part of what I'm wanting to do is trying to give that information to you today so you can make an informed choice. Okay, so I'm going to go through this quickly, and then we're going to break down some of these steps. Okay, so overall, even though they don't say it's the first step, in my mind, I strongly believe that the first step is ensuring that you have very advanced level of English. Okay, so for the nursing licensure process, it's the same across Canada in terms of language requirement. Okay, some of the other steps vary depending on the licensing body that you go with. But the NNAS steps is the same throughout all of Canada. It's basically step 4 and on that is different, okay, in each province and maybe with different regulators. Right? There's similarities, but there are also differences. English is something that's the same though, okay, and it's required by all licensing bodies to prove that proficiency. And you have two options. One option is to prove it by taking the CELBAN test. And the CELBAN test is a Canadian English language benchmark assessment for nurses. Some of you have already done that test and completed it, so congratulations to you. That's one huge hurdle that you don't need to think about anymore for a while. You can write the CELBAN 3 times, and then IELTS is, you know, International English Language Test, and that is something you can write more than 3 times. Okay, IELTS is an academic language test. Many of you have taken that test for immigration purposes or taken it before. So when I'm recommending one or the other, it does depend, you know, what you're comfortable with. Some people really like IELTS because it's a test they are comfortable with. They've done it before. They've studied it. They have different resources. So if that's you, you know, IELTS might be the test that you choose. We tend to recommend CELBAN, and the main purpose for that is that CELBAN is the only test designed for nurses, right? So it's something that tends to be a little more familiar in context. When you're writing in the CELBAN, you're basically taking point form, right, and in the chart, and you're writing a patient narrative report. So the context is familiar, but it's in English, right? So depending on your English ability, that might be an easy task or it might be very difficult. For listening, you're listening to a nurse and a patient, and you're responding by answering multiple choice questions. Okay. And the speaking, you're going through a more easier conversation where you're just talking about yourself, maybe, to a role play with a patient again, and talking about complex things such as stating your opinions and reasons for things. Okay, so in the cell band, it's something that tends to be more familiar, although there's waiting lists for both, right? So a little less waiting list for IELTS, more waiting lists for cell band. So that might play into your decision of what test you sign up for. Okay. After you have, let's say you come to Canada and you're in Winnipeg and you go to WELARC. So you're taking a Canadian English language benchmark test. And when you take the test, you get 6s. That would tell me that what you want to do is focus on your language improvement. Okay? So you might do that by taking one of our classes, which many of you have or you're currently doing, or you might take one of the many other classes available to you in Winnipeg or in Manitoba. So improving that skill before you pay those fees is what I want to emphasize, right? Some people think, well, I'm going to sign up for IELTS, I'm going to sign up for cell band, and they're not at all ready to do that, right? So the only thing that signing up too quickly does is that you're registered for a test and you're going to spend maybe over $300 to do that, right? If you register for it before you're ready, you're basically throwing your money away. Okay? So, and I don't want you to throw your money away, okay? So I strongly encourage you to think about readiness and to think about how are you proving to yourself if you're ready, and is that objective? So many people that we see, their language is very advanced, but to get from a level 8 in listening to a level 10 is not something that's done necessarily really quickly. Right? It's very advanced level communication, and it does take time, right? And practice. And some of you are experiencing that now in the program, and you're like, yeah, I wish it could, you can speed it up, but sometimes language learning, unfortunately, is something that you can't necessarily speed up. It does take time, okay? So I'm glad that, most of you today are in our program. That's excellent. So if you have friends that, are struggling, you might want to encourage them to get involved with an English program. There are many programs out there. There are other online programs as well for some of you that are living in rural Manitoba. I know there's a couple from Notre Dame, I think. So if you're outside of Manitoba or even inside Manitoba, there's a website called youliveandlearn.ca. Excellent practice. So, the more practice you can get with English, the better. NNAS, there's many steps to this. So that's something that's required by both. Applying to a licensing body. So after you're done your NNAS documentation, which is quite involved, you apply to either the College of Licensed Practical Nurses or CRNM, sometimes both, and there's additional fees that come with that. So NNAS right now is $650. I think CLPNM is $420, and CRNM is $525. All right. So part of the informed choice might be, well, I don't want to apply to both because that's going to be over, by the end of it will probably be over $3,000. Is that something I want? Or, some people decide, well, I want to risk it just in case one happens before the other. Okay. So again, make sure you have all the information so you can make a good decision on that. With both of them, there's a clinical competency assessment, also known as the CCA. With LPNs, they don't always make every internationally educated nurse go for the CCA. With the College of Registered Nurses, they make all internationally educated nurses go through a CCA. Right. That process has changed now, and if you go to CRNM's website, the information there is actually out of date. So that is something that I want to point out. If you have a handbook from the College of Registered Nurses, the handbook related to clinical competency is actually out of date at this time. Okay, so I just talked to someone yesterday and they told me that within the next week or so, there's going to be a big announcement regarding CCA. So you might want to be checking back CRNM's website over the next week. And they said it will also be updated in the guide, I'm hoping. So you might want to look at their website. So hopefully by February 5th, there's going to be information there regarding CCA. So it might be a totally different process than before. There's a lot of people not sure about that. All right, someone have a question? No? No, but yes. After CCA, so the purpose of CCA, does anyone know what the purpose of the clinical competency assessment is? You want to type that in the chat box. So the purpose of the CCA. Why do they make you do it? You might be asking that. Why? I don't know why. I'm not seeing anything here. Not sure? Okay, so, it assesses your skills if it is the same with the standards of practice here. Exactly, Alvin. Yeah, to assess your competency skills. Yes. Right. So if they're assessing competency, which they are, it's important to know what competencies they're assessing, right? So on the College of Licensed Practical Nurses, the College of Registered Nurses, they have entrance level competencies, so what someone would be starting as. So there are different competencies, you know, that someone might have if they've been working as a nurse for 10 years, and that's not what they're testing you. They're testing you for entrance level competencies. So I strongly encourage you to review that document or those documents that relate to entrance level competencies to see, you know, what are they going to be testing me on? What kinds of things am I going to be doing? And part of that is to see, you know, what to also recognize, what do you do well? There's a lot of nurses that complete a lot of the CCA really well. So they're not making you go through programs to do something you already do well, but rather they're trying to target what are some gaps that might exist. Right? So for some people, for example, they take the CCA and maybe they struggle with pharmacology and maybe they got their dosage calculations wrong or something like that. So that would be identified as a gap. Okay, so the College of Registered Nurses, maybe a College of Licensed Practical Nurses as well, would say that it's important to take the bridging program. They would require you to take the bridging program and to have the class on pharmacology. Okay. If it was maternal health, for example, the area that you didn't do very well on, in the bridging program, they would send you to the maternal health. Almost always part of the bridging program is related to Canadian nursing culture in Manitoba. Okay, so they give an overview of Canadian nursing culture and health practices in Canada, and that's kind of basically an introduction course, because they find that many IENs do need that component. Okay. So after the CCA, it's waiting again. Okay, so often people are waiting to take a language assessment, and NNAS, there's many documents involved, so they might be waiting for that. After you apply to licensing, it's again more paperwork, and there's a time of waiting in there as well. They'll write you a letter saying you need to do CCA. So right now there's a huge backlog with CRNM because they've been making many people wait, and there was already a huge wait time for people. So I anticipate that there's gonna be some more waiting there with the CRNM process. And then after they identify gaps, because of limited seating in the bridging programs right now, there's another wait. So people tend to wait for about a year and a half after they've done clinical competency. Okay, so that basically brings it to the average time to complete the process, and both processes is about 2 years. Okay. Some people, it might take 3 years, but generally it isn't done much quicker than that. Okay. The exception would be, there are a couple people that I know of that take the clinical competency and they meet competencies in all areas, so they might not need to go for bridging. So that would save them about a year and a half. Okay, so just so you know what to expect, I think it's really important for people to know the timeline or average timeline, so they can communicate with their families as well, right? And say, okay, this is, if they have, partners, or if they're living with, other family members, just so other family members understand, like, this isn't something that happens in 6 months, right? It's a long process, so that they understand you are working on it, but there are other things that are unfortunately out of your control, and a lot of it is just waiting. So just, it's important to communicate that to people and to plan for that as well, right? So if you're not in a nursing position right now, then what's trying to make choices on what are you going to do in that time, right? And for a lot of people, it's financially difficult as they're waiting to become a nurse as well. So trying to find employment that meet their needs as well. Okay, so I mentioned there's a lot of waiting, so I want to encourage you to plan for those waiting periods. Okay, so language is something that they assess prior to bridging, right? So prior, in the NNAS application, you need to show your language proficiency with CELBAN or IELTS. And then because they say the language tests expire in 2 years, for some people that language actually ends up expiring and they have to take a CELBAN again or an IELTS again right before they're finished their process. All right, so it's good to know, again, what to expect so you can plan for it. So for some people, they may have been successful in CELBAN and then not really practicing language, and maybe they're at home a lot, so they don't get that practice. So again, plan for that waiting period, okay? Because you might need to be tested again, depending on how long the process takes for you, okay? And also clinical skills. So you know, this is a struggle because you're sometimes tested in the CCA, but you've been in Canada for, you know, a couple of years, out of nursing maybe for several years. So haven't been in that that workforce. So, you know, how can those clinical skills be kept up to date? That's definitely a challenge many IENs face. So do any of you have ideas about that? How can you keep your language and clinical skills up to date? I'm going to type that in the box. So Priyanka, I just see your comment here. The waiting list for CCA for RN is around 2 years. I haven't heard that. I'm not sure. I am hoping that everyone will know more next week. So I really hope that that is not the case. That would be very disappointing. I think part of why they were changing the process is that they can put more people through the CCA. So but I'm not sure about what the waiting list is. Did you hear that from CRNM?
Actually, one of my friend, she's from Filipino, so she's ahead of me. So she got an email yesterday, saying, "Can you hear me?"
Yeah.
Okay, saying that now it's University of Manitoba that will conduct the CCA.
That's right.
And you have to pay for the CCA now, and it will be around 2,000 something. And once you pay for it, like after your CCA is completed, then your fees will be reimbursed to you. And now it's like that. So, but like some of the, as you told us, like you can't really rely on friends. But one of my friend told me that the waiting list is like really long, and you might have to wait for at least 2 years to appear in the CCA.
Yeah, I anticipate that it's quite long. But yeah, I haven't heard actual numbers from CRNM yet. So we can try to keep people posted on that on our Facebook page as well. So we'll, you know, but again, yeah, try to. So when CRNM sends out a letter to people, basically they need to then book it with U of M. So they'll say, okay, you need to go for a CCA, and then they'll have the number for you to contact them. So basically I would, if I were receiving the letter, I would contact them right away. Because waiting is you might just be later on. So as soon as you get that letter, I would call them so you can get in. Sometimes people make the mistake of like, well, I'm going to prepare first. So if they're doing that, they're basically kind of wasting time. So book it and then prepare.
So the thing I find really frustrating, Manola, is CCA. It's like, yeah, it's been clear that we are supposed to, read all the books and the pharmacology and basic nursing skills. But I sometimes feel like I'm all over the place. Sometimes I end up doing nothing because I don't know, like, what exactly should I do? Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's a challenge, right? It's trying to know how to study well. Like sometimes people put a lot of time into studying, but they may not be studying well. So I know what some people have done in the past, and again, I don't know what this new CCA is like. But like many people have attended various workshops that we have, standardized patient workshops, different workshops, and they've found that's kind of useful because they can apply some of that to the context. But also because they're testing like entrance level competencies, basically like trying to think of how you would also study for that exam maybe. So
well, that's a good point.
practicing multiple choice test, like NCLEX, even though it's not going to be an NCLEX exam, but they're testing the same competencies.
Yeah.
That might be something that I would recommend. And then focusing on probably your weakest area first. So there's some, I think, NCLEX readiness tests that you can take. I think you might need to purchase it, but they're quite good because you can take it initially and then it shows you your strengths and your weaknesses. So then if you take a test according to that and plan, okay, well, I did really well in this area, so why don't I focus my time and energy into, maybe mental health. So maybe my program back home, maybe, we didn't really talk about mental health, might be quite different here in Canada. Why don't I focus on that? Or, community health, learning about the needs of, Aboriginal patients perhaps, and, how to operate in a culturally sensitive manner. Those are things that are, enforced in the CCA. If you've never done a physical health assessment, that would sure be something to focus on, right? Because it's something that you need to do, will likely need to do in the CCA. So spending time on that. So there's some really good books that have videos in it. So then it's not just reading, right? But you can actually see what they're doing. So getting out books like that would be something I recommend.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you so much, Manuel.
No problem.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So I talked a little bit about this, but again, language proficiency, evaluate your readiness. If you haven't already done so, and this doesn't apply to most of you, enroll in a language training program so you can improve your skills and try to practice, right? So with language, it's not so much the content, but it's the practice that's important, right? So some people spend a lot of time reading, especially if maybe they're more isolated or they don't know a lot of people, so they might read a lot, which reading is one of the language skills, but language is spoken, right? Language is heard and language is written as well. So trying to make sure you're practicing those other skills as well, trying to get involved in things where you're using your English. Some of our students volunteer in hospitals and they're practicing speaking maybe that way. Enrolling in Skype sessions, so they're practicing speaking that way, but trying to emulate the practice. And if you're in the program, you're busy doing that right now. So you guys are familiar with our program, so I'm not going to spend time going through that, and where to find up-to-date information on our program. So I will go through that today. Okay. NNAS. So some of you might be very familiar with this. Some of you might not be. And I am just going to try to get out of my screen so I can share some of my other screens with you. Hi.
Manola, there's a question from Alvin, and he's just wondering why doesn't the college increase the numbers of test takers in order for them to accommodate more IENs to take CCCA and NCLEX?
NCLEX? So with NCLEX, it's not really an issue because people can almost write that every single day of the year. It's a computer-based test, so there's not really a wait list for NCLEX. With CCA, that has been a comment made by many people that have gone through the process, as well as other people that work with IENs. And when they were designing a new CCA, I believe that was something that they were trying to consider. So I'm very eagerly awaiting the announcement to see, if the structure is different and maybe they can even hold more people in the CCA. So that's what I'm hopeful for right now, but I guess we'll see what they say. But that's it's a very valid point. That's a good question. It would make a lot of sense to me as well. Sometimes it has to do with capacity, right, and not having enough assessors to assess. But some of it was the design of the previous assessment took a long time to facilitate too. So hopefully there'll be changes there. With the NNAS, how many people have been on this website? Have you guys mainly all been here? Just click on yes in the chat if you have. So the NNAS is a new service that came up August 2014. You might have friends that applied for CRNM or CLPNM before that date, so their process would be different. Right? So something to keep in mind. So this, I'm not going to go through the whole site because we don't have lots of time left, but I want to point out some helpful things and just some tips along the way, I guess, as well. So you can hit apply and log in and just start filling out some of the information. So some of this you can do without paying. You can kind of get to see what an application is. And I would actually encourage that to see, what's involved. But I would, again, not pay the fees until you know if your language is close, okay? Because they want your language to be valid within 6 months, okay? Or else your NNAS application is going to expire, right? So up at the top of this screen, you see there's home, how to apply, help, and FAQ. Okay? FAQ is a really excellent section of this site. And there's a lot of questions that probably you have. Okay? So I strongly encourage you to go to the FAQ, the frequently asked questions section, and look at some of the questions that other people have also asked, right? These are super common and they're explained really well. So go through this section. You can even do that before you apply or as you're filling out the application. Okay. So if you get flustered, remember that FAQ section is here, and there's a lot of helpful responses there. Okay, so reading through that. Okay. So fees, again, something to highlight. Okay. So new IEN applications, so let's say you're applying to CRNM only, is $650. Okay. And then if you would like to add another licensing body, let's say you want to add on the College of Licensed Practical Nurses, it's an additional $220. Okay. If you don't state that at the start of your application, then they'll make you pay another $650 again. Right. So again, trying to really understand, what LPNs are. Is that something that might be for you? Might be something to consider. Okay. So again, if you want to apply for 2, it's $650 plus the $220. If you do it at the time of the registration, if you wait, it's going to be another $650. All right, and then if you're reading through their page or you're filling out applications and you have questions, okay. Again, I'm going to go back to my question at the beginning. Have you gone directly to the source, right? So yes, the community is a good place to find out some information, but you don't want to be led down the wrong path, right? I've seen this before where people are given wrong information and it actually ends up wasting 6 months or something of their time, and you don't want that to happen to you. So listen to what people are saying perhaps, but confirm it to see if that truly is the case. So you know, they have contacts here, so don't be afraid to contact them with questions that you have, right? That's why they put up their contact information. So they have a toll-free phone number that wouldn't cost you anything, or you can also email. Right. Sometimes I find email is a good way to ask questions because you can go back and refer to it again, and you also have record, right? So if they say something, you have record of what they've said too, and you could say, well, actually, you know, in their email you said this, this, and this, and you have evidence of that as well. So sometimes initially asking in an email isn't a bad thing. You might even get a faster response, but again, they have phone numbers as well that you can reach. Okay. Okay, so that's a little bit about NNAS. Right. Sorry. Okay, so with NNAS, they also have an IEN handbook. There's lots of IEN handbooks for you guys. So happy reading. It's over 100 pages in all if you read all these handbooks. So it's lots of reading, and it is actually pretty confusing. So I encourage you to download it, print it out, and have a pen handy, circling sections that you might not be sure of, and then writing questions down that you have. So if you do make a call to NNAS, that you can ask them maybe all your questions at one time in an organized manner. And the same thing with CRNM, CLPNM. Okay. Yeah, so with the NNAS, that's where you'll be submitting. There is a criminal record check involved in there. You also need to submit education, and you need to submit hours of practice as well. Then they send an advisory report to the college that you chose. So to CRNM or CLPNM or maybe something else in Canada. And they basically, it takes, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. And they'll say, you know, that this applicant is, you know, meets X amount of competencies, or they might say that it's not equivalent to nursing in Canada. Okay, that doesn't happen as much though. Okay. So once the colleges receive that advisory report, then you need to fill out an application with the college. Okay. So for the College of Registered Nurses, that's when you would look at what their process is. You read through their handbook, and then it's another application, right? So NNAS is just the first step. It's not, you're not done after that. You've just kind of gotten started, which might sound crazy because it's a lot of work. So after that, then you go through the process with the licensing bodies. Okay. Okay, so, and again, their processes are different from licensing body to licensing body, as well as province to province. It might not be exactly the same. So the steps with CRNM and CLPNM, they might be similar, but not exactly the same. Okay. So again, if you're moving to another province, make an informed choice. Is it, you know, I might not encourage you to move if you're right in the middle of the process with CRNM. You might want to finish first, get your license, and then move, because once you're licensed as a nurse in Canada, whether it's CRNM or another province, you can move anywhere. But if it's in between the process, it gets quite complicated actually. Okay, so here are the steps in that. Okay, so reading through their packages is really important as well. Okay. With CRNM, they actually just recently updated their site. You probably have been on it. So before, you used to, the layout used to be different, and it was a little bit confusing where to go for IENs. Now it's right on their homepage, internationally educated applicants. Right. You can also see there's some great webinars coming up on documentation, and anyone can register for that. So I might encourage you to register for that. That might be another way to practice for CCA. So just trying to get involved in different activities that are available to you. There are some free workshops, trying to look at what those might be. With CLP&M, they have quite a bit on their website. So there's also a little video that explains the process. So you might want to listen to that slideshow as well as download their guide. But again, their process is slightly different as well. But reading through that and making sure you have all of that information. Any questions before I keep going on? We're almost done here. All right, so maybe Barry, just step in if you see something in the chat, just let me know.
There is one.
Okay.
Oh, actually, there's a couple of now. One for Tamernesh. What are the steps if you want to go back to school to study nursing? Are they going to take some of the credits that you've received from back home? And how long are the waiting lists?
All right, so with that, I can't answer, unfortunately, that question 100% accurately because every school does something slightly different. So they might accept some of the credits and they might not. From what I've seen is generally it doesn't seem like they do. So they generally make people take it over again. Okay, I haven't heard of many IENs that their first choice is to just take the whole nursing. From what I am aware of currently, the wait list for nursing for RN program is 2 to 3 years. Right, just to get into the program. So some people register with U of M and take entry-level programs that transfer into nursing, but it's a pretty long wait. With LPNs, I think it's also about a 2-year wait, unless you might go like to UCN, University College of the North, might not have as long of a wait, but that's something you would need to check with the colleges or universities with that. So that's a totally separate process, and you need to investigate that with U of M or Red River College. Okay.
There's a question from Nicholas. Does the CCA also have a validity period?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Does the CCA also have a validity period? How long is a CCA valid for?
I don't believe the CCA has an expiry. To my knowledge, they say that someone will only go through the CCA once. Because the purpose isn't to keep testing people, is to test them once, and then that person goes for gap training. Okay. So if you haven't done the gap training, they're not going to say do the CCA again. They're going to say go for gap training. Does that make sense?
Okay, and then while we're waiting for Nicholas to respond, okay, yeah, he says okay, great. Alvin has a question. All in all, how much will the fees be in the overall process?
That is a good question. I think I've done the math before, and it was over $2,000. So I'm going to talk about funding available because it gets really expensive. And that also depends how many times you take a language test, right? So if, and that's part of why we say make sure you're ready to take that test, because it gets really expensive to keep testing if you're not quite ready. So sometimes paying the fees to delay the test is a lot cheaper than paying, you know, $325 and failing. So yeah, that brings up the fees a little bit, but I think it's over $2,000. And now if you need to pay for the CCA, it's going to be quite a bit over that. But again, from my understanding, they're going to be reimbursing you afterwards for that. But for the upfront costs, you would have to have, you know, quite a bit of money available for that.
Okay, and Jazz has a question. If you're practicing as an LPN and want to practice as an RN, what's the process?
You need to go through the whole RN process. Oh, sorry, if you're practicing currently as an LPN?
Yes.
Yeah, so they, unfortunately, there's not like just a quick transfer with that. You would still need to do the whole RN process from the beginning, like everything basically. So you need to go through NNAS, you need to do this whole thing. Okay. One thing they do, I believe, is that they take your nursing experience though, because you've been working as an LPN. I believe that that they take your nursing experience that you've been working, but I would also try to confirm that with CRNM, because sometimes depending on who you talk to, it seems like some of that has changed. So just confirm that.
And then from Nicholas, is there anything like a safe practice period?
Once they're working?
I'm not sure. Nicholas, once you're working?
Yeah, hello.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to inquire that, like, how long back we should have been practicing nursing, like RN or something. Like we should be RN 3 years back, or like what?
Mm-hmm. So basically, because they do a clinical competency assessment, they're looking for safety, right? That's part of the purpose of them doing it. So people can do that if they have no experience, or you know, if they have, you know, a couple of years of experience, but some of that's not recent. They all go through the CCA. So that is kind of the safety check there. Okay. So that's where they would say, oh, you know, someone might not be, they might not meet some competencies because they have been out of practice for several years. But once you're employed, it's different. Okay, so once you're employed, generally a probationary period, I believe is, I'm trying to think if it's 3 months or 6 months. I believe it's 3 months. Sometimes employers, if they're seeing there's concerns in practice, they might extend probationary periods. But if they
No, it's not the probation what I'm asking.
yeah, so it's with CCA, yeah, so it's not really an issue. If you, unless you've been out of practice for, let's say, I need to double check my numbers there, but I believe if it's more than 5 years, then they might say, okay, because you've been out of practice for so long, you might need to go back to a program. But that's something that would be assessed within NNAS and the CCA.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. All right, I'm just gonna keep going for a little bit because I know we're running out of time. We talked about CCA, and I believe that people kind of understand the process of that. So I'm gonna go on. And the bridging program, you guys can read a little bit more about that, but just to see for BPIEN, level 1 is not required, it's just language. Level 2 is 16 weeks. There's courses and workshops, and then there's a 6-week practicum. Okay, so that's 22 weeks about with the BPIEN. Okay, and that doesn't need to be scheduled back to back all the time. There's sometimes flexibility. There might be some options for online learning there too. But there's for sure face-to-face components. And that's currently only available in Winnipeg. So something else to consider for when you're closer to that date is that unfortunately, currently it's only available in Winnipeg. I'm going to kind of go through this because it's very similar. The PNQR, so Practical Nursing Qualification Program, which is basically bridging, is a similar timeline. Okay. But for RN trained people, you might not need nearly as much, okay, but there's also a wait time for that. And then some of you were talking about money. So I want to make sure I talk about this is different funding available. Recognition counts is something that is available to you. I'm just going to pull up this site quickly. So you can see here that they do provide low interest loans, okay, of up to $10,000 because they understand that for skilled immigrants, it does cost a lot of money to get back into their field and to pay for all these licensure fees and like textbooks, things like that. So the loan can be used for, you know, anything. So they understand cost of childcare is expensive, groceries, just general bills. So that isn't just for the cost of licensure, but basically to help with living as well. So you can apply to them for that. And again, it's a very low interest loan, okay? And you don't need the same kind of credit checks as some other banks might need for having different credit checks here in Canada. Some people are new to Canada, so they don't have that credit history in Canada. So sometimes that's a challenge. So it's important to be aware that that is something available to you. Okay. We're getting very short on time here. Just thinking what else. Questions again. I'll go back to someone had a question, I think.
Hi, Manola. It was just about the recognition counts. Alvin was wondering if it was good to apply for it, but then I think you might have answered his question.
Oh, perfect.
Another slide. Does that answer your question, Alvin?
I read your mind. It's a question many people have, right? Because you come here and yeah, everything is really expensive. So and that's for any profession. So if you have other family members that are also in regulated trades or are skilled newcomers, that's something available to them as well. Okay, so it's a really, really excellent program to be aware of.
Manola, are there any books that you would suggest for the CCA?
Yeah, and if you haven't already gone to my video on the Ask a Nurse discussion board, I think everyone said that they're in our program, so you can see that. So if you click on Ask a Nurse, I talk about some of those books, and I talk about some prep as well for CCA. So if you want to go there after, post a comment. I would love to hear from you. All right, so I'm just going to wrap up, and then if you have questions, I can stay for a little bit longer. I know some of you might have to leave, so if some of you have to leave today, feel free. I understand that you guys have prior commitments, and some have little kids running around too, so no problem. So some things that I want to emphasize is that remember that the nursing culture and the scope of nursing here in Canada might be different than what you're used to. So go through some of those standards of practice, competency documents that are on the college's website, and be intentional about improving cultural communication and English skills. That will take you a long way, right? And know kind of know what your weaknesses are. So try to think of what you can do to assess that. If you need guidance there, we have RN consultants. So if you post questions on Ask a Nurse, they'll be happy to answer them as well related to clinical skills. Review NNAS and your regulatory body's website. So I know that's a ton of reading, but it's really, really important that you do that. Okay. And be aware of when documents are expiring. Okay, so they have, maybe it might be in fine print, but the colleges do not keep track of when your documents are expiring. So they're not going to send you an email or a phone call and say, hey, Alvin, your CELBAN expires in a month. If you don't give it to us, then you need to pay another fee to extend your file to have that open. They're not going to tell you that until maybe your documents have already expired, and then it's too late. So if you're getting your documents ready and you know this paper expires in 2 years, this one might be good for 6 months, I would plug that if you have a cell phone or whatever you use for calendar and keeping organized. I would plug that in my phone personally, and 1 month before it's going to expire, maybe even earlier. For language, I might put a 6 month before it expires, so you can get actually in to get tested. But be very aware of those time frames, because I know people have run into problems when those documents expire. And then funding and loans available. So you might want to go back to that recognition counts and know that you're not alone. So I know that it is a struggle for many, but know that you're not alone. So there's many IENs here. There's a lot of different service providers that work with IENs. So our program is just one of those. If you're not on our Facebook page already, I encourage you to join. It's a place where we try to put different information, different resources up. Of course, we're on Twitter as well, CCCN Canada. You can find us there, follow us. And then the Filipino Nurses Association, some have mentioned PNAM already. They're open to all IENs, so even if you're not from the Philippines, you're still able to join their association, and they have a lot of excellent services available. It's very low cost for what they give you. They have social gatherings, they have different nursing workshops, and they're just excellent. So you can find them on Facebook as well, Philippine Nurses Association. And then here is just the page of links available to you. So most of these you're probably already familiar with. Some of those might be new to you, but we went over most of those today. And with every session, we collect feedback, and that's how we kind of know we're on the right track, or we know that there are things to improve. So it shouldn't take too long to complete that form. So if you can take just a couple minutes after today to complete that form, that would be excellent. I think Briar's going to put the link in the chat box so you can click on it. But if you can take a couple minutes to do that, I would greatly appreciate that. And I just want to thank you guys all for your time today, and I'll open it up to questions. Wondering if we can share our videos again. If you happen to have questions.
Yeah, so if you just want to share your video, I won't put everyone on video in case you don't want to be on video. Or unmute yourself if you have any more questions.
Any questions at all? Jazz?
None really. Thank you for the information.
Okay, great.
Yeah. There are lots to read.
Yes, it's so much. It's overwhelming.
Yes.
Nice to have you here today.
Thank you too.
Okay, so you might not have questions right now. It's quite a bit of information, and you might have more later as you read through some of those documents. Again, I do respond to questions on Ask a Nurse as well, and Betty and Linda do as well. Or you can also, put your question in the discussion board and within the program too. So if you have questions after you're reading through it and you're like, oh, I don't know, feel free to ask there. That's one place you can ask. You can ask on our Facebook page as well if you want. You can also send me an email or give me a call. But again, don't feel like you need to figure it all out yourself. That's part of why we're here. So thank you again for your time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you.
weekend.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you do.